After what you went through, surely the WHO wouldn't try to introduce a treaty that would silence all dissent and allow profit in the event of another pandemic, would they? Of course they would. Hello there, you 6.4 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining me on this voyage to truth and freedom. It's so important that you turn on the notification bell right now because we make this content every single day. And you know that the algorithm's just going to direct you towards the mainstream for more hypnosis and more distraction. Stay with us so that we can keep this dialogue going, such as I did with the fantastic Dr. John Campbell, who rose, as you know, to significance during the pandemic with his unflinching analysis of data and facts around medications, lockdowns, responses to certain measures. He was an impeccable voice. Nevertheless, he recently got a YouTube strike simply for mentioning one of the forbidden words. I had a fantastic conversation with Dr. John. I always learn when I speak with him. I learn about freedom of speech. I learn about the necessity for integrity. I learn that authority is diminishing at the centers of power where we need it most. You are going to learn from this conversation as well. Stay right to the end and let me know in the chat and the comments what you think.
Dr. John, Andrew Bridgen, he was in the news because he stood up in Parliament and started talking about injury and the way that people had lent into that particular policy in ways that in retrospect was not as watertight as was initially suggested, that lockdown policies were unreliable, and he's made some headway, but I think he's since been booted out of the Conservative Party, which is our equivalent of the Republican Party here in the UK, and there's an attempt to censor and shut down him. Now, me as a person that's more, I wouldn't really align myself with the Conservative Party in Great Britain, God, no. But I'm very interested, of course, in freedom of speech, and I'm particularly interested in this subject. What in particular did you find interesting? What is is there a particular substance or medication that you mentioned? Remember, you're on Rumble now, John, so you're safe to talk freely, that you think may have led to the ban? And I'm presuming it's something that Andrew said, because we have things like that often with our guests. They come on here shouting their mouths off, and we have to pay the bill.
Yeah. I mean, I've looked through what he said really quite carefully, and everything that he has said, we've said on previous videos. He did mention, and really only in passing. So that could have been the issue. You sort of kind of get the impression that because it was Andrew Bridgen, it was looked through perhaps more carefully than it would have been normally. But whether you agree with Andrew Bridgen or not, really, Russell, I don't think that's the issue. The point is giving counter-argument. And the whole point of our democracy is we have the Houses of Commons, which is supposed to be a debating chamber. So if Andrew Bridgen wants to come on and say, well, I believe there's a Loch Ness monster, or I believe we've been visited by aliens, then as a member of parliament, he's allowed to do that. And the other members of parliament should give counter-argument. But Andrew Bridgen hasn't done that. He's said things that are perfectly reasonable. He's given evidence for it. He's consulted senior scientists around the world. Where is the debate? Where is the counter-argument? Where is people saying, well, you've given that evidence, but let's look at this evidence, or you've cited that guideline, let's look at that guideline. Why is there no debate going on? Why has a sitting member of parliament been effectively silenced by his colleagues? I find that really quite concerning, Russell.
You know, throughout the pandemic, the reason you attracted such a large audience on your YouTube channel is because you are trustworthy and authentic and honest, and as a medic you recognize the significance and importance of all medicines, including and in some cases especially vaccines. But that has to be underwritten by clinical trials, honest debate, transparency around the data. And throughout this, I think you've just walked a tightrope of authenticity, rigor and honesty. I think it's incredible how you've done it. I think it's absolutely, well, it's not only, it doesn't appall me that you've been booted off for a week, but it informs me what's happening here. Particularly, did you check what we had there, Dr. John, about the spate of legislature being passed either through the EU, over in Ireland, Canada, the Five Eyes countries? What do you make of that, John?
There does seem to be a worldwide movement at the moment, Russell, and of course we've got this new World Health Organization treaty, which there's been a debate in Parliament about. But the only reason there was a debate in Parliament about that was because there was 156,000 signatures from concerned members of the public, and that triggered this parliamentary debate because it reached the 100,000 signatures. And it's not just Andrew Bridgen. We've had quite a few other MPs expressing really quite significant concern about this. The idea that information can be controlled, and the idea that unelected bureaucrats, who happen to be in Geneva in this case, can pass laws or pass edicts which would be binding in the United Kingdom. And it does seem to be happening all around the world. So there seems to be like what you might call an international zeitgeist at the moment, an international movement. It's Canada and New Zealand are probably the worst. Ireland, as you've said, issues going on there. The United States, the United Kingdom, all seem to be moving in the same direction. It's almost like some sort of mass virus that's affecting people in different parts of the world. But the question in my mind is, why is this affecting people in different parts of the world all at the same time? Is there some underlying cause? Is there some underlying motivation? Is there some coordination to this? Because otherwise it just seems like one heck of a big coincidence to me.
Conspiracy theorists would say that they're perhaps acting in concert because of the communication that takes place through organisations like the WF, WHO, because of their shared commercial interests and the evident necessity to crush counter-narratives as you seek to increase centralised authoritarianism at a time that it is plain that the opposite is what's required. Open debate, independent media, new political movements. We'll be talking to RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., next week, and our investigation in the show where we have a deeper look at one story from the news centres around RFK. Do you have any optimism, John, that this time of universal censorship, Kafkaist judiciary, smearing and the crushing of dissent will lead to oppositional independent political movements as well as independent media voices, of which you are now notably and plainly one?
The independent media voice is yes for the time being, although, as we both know, we're being controlled in that respect, Russell. I did talk to Andrew Bridgen about this, and it's interesting because we've got these people making decisions externally to us. And I said, have you not got any doctors in Northwest Leicestershire that you can ask about things? Because they're much more likely to know what the requirement is locally rather than someone externally. This principle of subsidiarity, which we're making decisions more locally. Whether there's going to be any coordinated international opposition to this is really quite hard to see. It is happening insidiously. It's happening slowly. So people aren't realizing the dramatic shift that there's been. But it's so concerning because you were talking about hate before, Russell, and we know that in totalitarian regimes which have arrived on the far right and the far left, we don't need to give examples. But hate has been defined by what the next door neighbor doesn't like about you. They use this as a way of reporting you. They use this as a way of getting at you. So it's easy to point out flaws in my media, in your media, in anyone's media, but they're not offensive. But if someone is interpreting that as being offensive, and at the moment the key word is hate, that we're hating if we breach these guidelines. In the past, it's been loyalty to the party.
We have no.
And who's going to define that is the key issue. That's what frightens me.
There is no worthy authority to whom we can yield with such matters. That's increasingly what we find because there is so much high profile collusion. You can't say in all honesty, well, we will trust you to be the body or institution or individual that decides what information should be censored or what constitutes hatred, and we know that we can trust you to use that judiciously and not as a way to leverage your own financial and interests and your own dominion. John, I can see you've got another thought forming because I can tell from your face.
Yeah. The other problem in the very perceptive, Russell. The other problem in the United Kingdom is that it's very hard to have independent voices of opposition because of the political party system that we have in this country. So basically, it's impossible, virtually impossible, to become a member of parliament in the United Kingdom unless you're in a particular party. So the Conservative Party have got maybe half a dozen MPs that have spoke out against the COVID narrative, and they've been largely silenced by the party. Labour, Scottish Nationalists, Lib Dems, hard to think of any MPs there that have really spoken out against it, because there's this party narrative. Now, if I wanted to stand for Parliament, which I don't particularly, or you wanted to stand for Parliament, and we stood as an independent, then in a particular constituency with our first past the post system, you would be going up against the party system. And this has a lot of power, it's got a lot of history and a lot of strength. So our democracy is only mediated through the political party system, and it's virtually impossible for independent voices to be heard, at least in government. The House of Lords is an exception to that to some degree, but even there, the party system holds an awful lot of sway. So I am somewhat pessimistic about independent voices, pointing out this international trend to collectivization, to data control.
Our in studio guest in a moment, Daniel Chandler, has written a book, Free and Equal. He'll be talking a lot about how the systems and institutions of democracy are prohibitive. He talks a lot about the first past the post system rather than proportional representation that we have in this country. And you scarcely need look at the systemic abuses within American politics to understand that it's always a result of expenditure, donations, lobbying. When I say it's always a result of, I mean the sort of the movements of power and what gets legislated, what gets maligned, and what gets ignored. There are so many ways of shutting down debate. Just anecdotally, Dr. John, we very much enjoyed the bit of footage where Anthony Fauci spoke to an African-American family and tried to tell them, these are the reasons why you should be taking these medications. These are the advantages of it. They were so well informed. They really understood the issues well. They really understood the challenges. They really understood the anomalies that were likely in place and subsequently revealed to be problems, like the lack of clinical trials around transmission. A lot of people intuited that, and of course it's conversationally and statistically understood that certain communities, i.e. the economically poor, the people of colour, were vaccine hesitant, as the term was then. And we learned the other day from our guest, who was it? Was it Schellenberger told us this, or was it that told us that they spent a lot of money infiltrating civil rights movements in order to persuade people to take medication, to take those medications? That Pfizer directly, I think it was Li Fang, the journalist Li Fang, told us that Pfizer invested in promoting their product in all sorts of peculiar and extraordinary ways. It's just been so lovely to walk this path with you. You're going to have to be careful about who you have on as a guest in future.
Well, there you go. Do you feel a little bit brighter now? Do you feel a little more relieved? Do you just love Dr. John? Wouldn't you like to give him a cuddle from time to time? What a great guy he is. Thanks very much for watching this. Let us know what other guests you'd like us to have on. And remember, we are on Rumble for 1 hour every day at these times. I'd love to see you there. If you enjoyed this video, watch either of these, turn on the notification bell and subscribe to our channel so that we get all of our daily content to you. 7 days a week, a video gets released right here for you, same time. More important than any of that is that you please stay free.